Moderator Sri Bablu Loitongbam, Director Human Rights Alert, and our esteemed speaker, Sri Sanjoy Hazarika, Director, Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, in short, CHRI, Dr. Alana Golme, General Secretary of Northeast Support Center, Sri Sadananda Sorokaibam, MGIS. He'll be speaking about the role played by the Manipur State Legal Services Authority during this pandemic. Deputy Member Secretary Manipur, SALSA, judicial officers, and our esteemed guests to this program. I also like to thank Sri Sanjoy Hazarika and Dr. Alana Golme for graciously accepting our invitation to speak at our program in spite of their busy schedule. Further, I would like to request Bablu Loitongbam to kindly initiate the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for the warm welcome speech and for welcoming all of us into this very novel way of organizing the International Human Rights Day. These are hard times. All of us are constrained by the unprecedented pandemic in which we are all suffering. However, like all other hard times, this is also an opportunity to organize ourselves in new ways. And if we recollect the way in which the international human rights regime has come about, it is not too different from our situation. In fact, it was a much worse situation that the world found itself. In the middle of the Second World War, when the whole of Europe was under the grip of the Nazi rule, it was in August 1941 that the very seat of human rights was shorn, a time which was extremely tough and difficult. So it is sometimes the darkest hours in our history and times that brings about some of the finest gems, so to speak, in our history. So human rights was born when, in the middle of the Second World War, when Churchill, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom at that point of time, and Roosevelt met in Atlantic and promised the world what they call the hope for the world, to make world free from hunger and fear, and also to promise that every people will be governed by their own will and not by the will of stronger and more powerful people. This has become the Atlantic Charter. We have eventually, after the end of the war, came out with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is unique and unprecedented in history. For the first time in human history, it was on this day that the world has agreed that these 30 principles are the fundamental rights and freedoms which everybody should enjoy. So today's theme of 2020 is how do we recover? And I think one very critical point for us to remember is, as we recover from very difficult times, we should not lose sight of this hard-earned fundamental rights and freedoms. And it is how human rights itself have come about. And therefore, when we recover from COVID, it is important for us to stick to this principle, to stand up for human rights, and to ensure that when we reorganize our lives, the basic and fundamental rights of every human being is not forgotten. And I think MASLSA have also chosen a very critical issue that needs to be discussed, because a right without a remedy is no right. Because therefore, unless and until we have some way in which our grievances can be redressed, their right has no meaning. And therefore, MASLSA, like other legal services authorities, are also working very hard to ensure that the poor and the underprivileged are also given access to justice. And of course, we today have a wonderful panel who will be throwing more light on this issue, on the issue of how we access justice. Without much ado, let me go straight to introducing our panel. We would like to follow the same order in which the posters are showing. We plan to start with Dr. Sanjoy Hazarika, who will give a very broad overview on the various bridges and barriers. What are the barriers and what are the bridges for access to justice in India's northeast region? And then we will go to Alana, and then we will go to Sadananda. But of course, we don't need further introduction of Sanjoy Hazarika. He is perhaps the most well-known figure in the Northeast. Currently, he works as the International Director of Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, an international civil society organization with headquarters in New Delhi and with offices in Accra and London. Works on issues of legal aids, which is a central issue that we are discussing today, prison, police reform, RTI, as well as media rights and advocacy. He was a former reporter of the New York Times, and he also founded the South Asia Media Defenders Network. He is often interviewed for television and media on rights and governance issue. He also launched the Center for Northeast Studies and Policy Research, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, and founder of CSEC, which works on innovative health approaches through its acclaimed Bot Clinic, which has reached 250,000 people in Assam with healthcare over the past decade. Author of 6 books, filmmaker, columnist, policy advisor, he is currently also a member of government committees and CSO boards and coalitions, including the convener of the Working Group on Human Rights in India and the United Nations, to which I am also a member. So we had the opportunity of sitting with Sanjoy Da, and without much ado, we would like to request Sanjoy Da to set the tone of this discussion on the issue of the bridges and barriers of access to justice in Northeast India. Looks like there's some technical glitch and he's been disconnected. So can we then, so that we don't lose much time, go straight to Alana? Would that be all right, Alana, from your side?
Yes, it's fine with me.
Okay. Let me also then take the opportunity of introducing Alana Golmay. He's a dear friend, and she's a humanitarian, lawyer, and general secretary of Northeast Support Center and Helpline, which was launched in 2007 with the aim to prevent harassment, discrimination, molestation, and abuse meted out on the people from Northeast India living in Delhi and the NCR, particularly for the women. Alana has been relentlessly helping and spearheading for the cause of women and receiving prestigious awards for her work pertaining to human rights. Her meaningful efforts have touched over many lives directly and have helped sensitize the authority regarding the issue. Since then, she has been a voice of the unheard, unseen, and unacknowledged. Since more than 10 years, he has been spearheading in the fight for justice against racial discrimination and hate crimes meted out to the Northeast people living in the metro cities in India. She has founded the Pan Nu Foundation in 2013, and at the backdrop of the rising violence against women in today's world in the form of gender-based discrimination, physical and mental abuses, the foundation is committed to safeguard and uphold the dignity of women and strive against all forms of discrimination and crime against women, irrespective of caste, class, race, religion, and geographical region. Above all, Alana is a dear friend of anybody in Delhi who is in distress. A lawyer, a social activist, and a dear friend. Alana, please feel free to share your thoughts on the issue of access to justice, and particularly we would like you to focus on the racial discrimination during the COVID pandemic, the lockdown, the misconceptions that is going on around. The floor is yours.
Abhishek, please battery. Yeah, for the kind introduction. I just have some problem with my battery. You just do the needful. I hope you can hear me. I'm sorry for the inconveniences. Yeah, thank you for the kind. Can you hear me?
Yes, very loud and clear, please.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you, Miles. Oh.
Unfortunately, looks like Alana is also down. So we are not the best people with technology. So perhaps we might have to get to Sadananda. Sadananda, are you ready? We might have to reverse the whole process. Yeah, Sadananda. I think we are already streaming. Should we go ahead? Or? Because the time is also essential. Anyway, looks like luck has not been very much in our favor, but nevertheless we will try to fight it back. Now I think I'll pass on the baton to Sorokhaivan Sadananda. Again, let me quickly introduce him. He has passed his BA LLB from the Department of Law, Northeast Hill University in Shillong in 2012.
Hello.
Yes. Sanjay, can you come online, please?
Yeah, I've joined.
Please, Sanjay, you please take the floor before we get disconnected again. Yes, please go ahead, Sanjay.
I couldn't hear you very well. Sorry, Bablu.
We can hear you very well, though.
You want me
so you please continue.
You want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Golme, Member Secretary of the Manipur SLSA, my very good friend and fighter for human rights, Bablu Loitambam, whom all of you know very well, my fellow speakers, Dr. Alana Golme, a very long-time crusader against racial discrimination and prejudice in Delhi, and Mr. Sadananda Sorakhamba, Deputy Secretary of the Deputy Member Secretary of the MLSA, and Sujata Ningthemcha, who ensured that I managed to join this meeting. I have tried very hard. This is a new technology, and I'm not sure quite. Manipur being on the border is at the first on this kind, anyway. But members of the bar of the MLSA of the district legal services authorities who are present here, and respected participants. I hope you can all hear me clearly. Thank you for this opportunity to reconnect with Manipur, a state I have visited for over 30 years, where I have many friendships in the valley and in the hills. And although the visit is virtual, I hope it will be in person in the coming months. And I deem it a privilege to speak to you on the International Human Rights Day, when we salute human rights defenders who continue their lonely uphill struggles, which seem only to get more difficult every day, but also to speak about the upholders of justice who make that defense possible and the good fight for rights a reality. These daily warriors for justice are people like yourselves, and many like you across the country, across the region, across the world, especially at this time of COVID 19, when technology may have reduced the risk of the in person appearance. But as we are seeing today, we still have a long way to go with technology to be truly effective. It's a time when the pandemic has forced restrictions on all of us, including travel, connectivity, association, and assembly. Some of the fundamental rights, which are universal rights, which are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, have been abridged by the force of the pandemic and also by governments across the world, which are only too eager and willing to use this as an opportunity to curb free and open spaces, to crack down on dissent, freedom of expression, and on those people who they regard as troublesome and their voices and presence as inconvenient. So, this is an area all of us need to be always vigilant about, speak up for, and act upon, because fundamental rights remain indivisible. Manipur is not just among the beautiful parts, most beautiful parts of the country. It's deeply connected to the cultures and histories of Southeast Asia, not just the Northeast. You are a state, a land which has produced remarkable, legendary figures and heroes, such as Major Bob Kathing, who brought Tawang into India's ambit, Irabot Singh, the historic figure of Tikendrajit Singh strides across your lands, and many others, even in the contemporary times, who have brought the discourse of rights and reality of injustice to the doorsteps of Delhi and forced it to listen to public voices and actions. We are deeply conscious of the rights struggles for rights and identity, justice and against injustice. And today I'd like to use this opportunity to share my experiences which have a bearing on the subject. I will look at three areas. First, the issue of addressing grievances in challenging conditions, or what one would call in these days mitigating strategies of reducing hurt, harm, and pain to victims of an act of violence or intimidation. The second is the issue of representation in police, judiciary, and the legal services and legal service authorities. And finally, the question of what can be done in specific relation to one key issue which is before all of us in many parts of the country, that of custodial violence. You will all recall, perhaps very well, that I was a member of the Justice Jeevan Reddy Committee to review the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in 2004. We had come to Imphal. I was a member of that committee, and we were greeted with a bun, a few effigies, and deserted streets. Justice Reddy was troubled by the protests and asked in our internal discussion what our response should be. And I said that we should welcome the public people's democratic right to dissent and protest, because through that they are also presenting us with a view or many views. Of course, public hearings were held. Many came. Some of you participated in that. I know Bablu and others were there. And I'm sharing a learning from that, which can be considered for use to reduce or mitigate tension and concerns. Among its many recommendations, the committee had proposed a mechanism that would assuage reduce, meet public concerns about people who are taken away for questioning on various charges, whether these were specified or not. That was, in our view, a mitigation strategy because people often, especially relatives, close relatives, just wanted information about their loved ones. There was a need to be assured of their safety, of their health, and often they were taken away with good reason by the police and security forces, at other times without good reason. And their safety was paramount in the minds of those who asked. We are all aware of the mandate of producing an arrested person before a magistrate within 24 hours of their arrest. However, I believe that there are exceptional cases, truly exceptional cases, where this is not possible, whether it's because of terrain, weather, communications, and other genuine factors. I think that a grievance redressal cell can be designed and developed as a mechanism to share basic information about the well being of the detained person. And members of such grievances cells can be drawn whether from departments, relevant departments of government, but also involve the SLSA, the DLSA, and civil society. On the second matter that I'd like to address, the issue of representation in police, judiciary, and legal services. I think that gender representation is highly necessary and critical to get legal services, legal aid, and the administration of justice to vulnerable groups in our society, especially women and children. Last year, and I was speaking of this just before this meeting began, at this time, around the 22nd, I think, of December, the Tata Trust brought out an India Justice Report where it ranked different states according to various parameters and indicators across four pillars: police, prisons, judiciary, and legal services. There were many indicators. One of the indicators was vacancies in representation or personnel. It reviewed Manipur but did not rank it along with other states where the AFSPA was in place, because the latter means that there is an extraordinary situation and normal policing is not possible, even though, as we all know, conditions overall in Manipur and other states of the Northeast have improved. And we need to find a way of overcoming this hurdle of reporting on this issue in future justice reports and assessments. If I look at the police and legal services segments on the 2019, this is a 2019 report based on earlier data. I recognize the challenges, difficulties, and hurdles that you face on a daily basis. Since this is a 2019 report, exactly a year ago, I hope things have changed for the better by now. There is an updated version which is to be launched hopefully next month. And there was a very lively discussion, I recall, last year in Imphal at the launch of the report, where many of you were present. Now, some of the findings from that report for police, judiciary, and legal services, let me just share. And these are very briefly. As far as the police is concerned, the state had high levels of vacancies across ranks. There were 1 in 4 officers' posts were vacant. It has been unable to meet the scheduled tribe or OBC quotas. However, it has exceeded the SC representation in the police. Over 5 years, women representation in the force has improved, but the share among women among officers has actually reduced. So you have one positive thing and one negative thing. I'd say here that it is in ensuring legal services for suspects and accused persons at police stations is most urgent. But what does and I'll come to that later towards the closing of my remarks, what does the report, the starter report, say on legal services very briefly? It says that about Manipur, about half of the DLSAs do not have a full-time secretary sanctioned. Against the sanction number, all posts were vacant. On an average, each of the 5 jails does not have a legal services clinic. If we were to look at the judiciary very briefly again, for the criminal justice system may not work in tandem, but there are intrinsically the 4 segments of 4 pillars of judiciary, legal services, police, and prisons are intrinsically and connected to each other. As far as the judiciary, the report says 1 in 3 judge posts remained vacant at the High Court level. There were no women judges in the High Court. Over 5 years in both courts, cases pending per judge, total cases pending, and judge vacancies have reduced. So, as I said, this is a 2019 report. I have not been able to check to find out how whether some of this has changed. So, you'll forgive me if there is some change which is not reflected in what I've said. But thus, in the current COVID situation, and hopefully in a more hopeful post COVID situation, whenever that is, with regard to access to justice, there is a growing reliance on improved technology for virtual hearings and disposal of cases. This is what I think could present one of the bridges rather than a barrier. And in this bridge, one sees the need for virtual courts, better video conferencing for on issues of remand and legal aid, as well as telephone connectivity. I know that in a case in the Central Information Cases Commission, one of my colleagues has actually used WhatsApp to argue his case, and that WhatsApp call has been accepted. So I think that is, we have to reinvent the way we approach situations. So these challenges could actually reduce. These are challenges of improved technology, but these can improve and reduce the burden of physical appearance. The frequent adjournments which plague our system, and the huge caseload on judges, and the pressure under which the system has always been groaning. I believe that the recent Supreme Court judgment on the need to install CCTV cameras in police stations is an opportunity to build a bridge to public trust and confidence. Because you can have the best infrastructure in the world, but if public trust is not there, if the empathy for the public is not there from the other side, we will not get the information or the service or the delivery of justice that's needed. For people should not be afraid of either approaching the police or entering a police station. Now, how many of us who are not lawyers can say that we are very confident when we want to approach the police or want to enter a police station? And I think this is where the bridge building is important, where public and legal education is critical. And this, I believe, the role of the SLSAs and the DSLAs in building public trust and a better educated public legally, it's an additional and a congruent role. In the northeastern region, we see a disproportionately high spending on police, but relatively lower spending on judiciary. That is because of situations which have existed, which continue to exist as far as insurgency and ethnic confrontations are concerned, political problems. But an impact of this spending priority is that there is limited capacity for oversight. And we are aware of substantial legal aid budget cuts, which I regard as a barrier to justice delivery. May I put it to you that one of the bridges of crossing this large river of lack of funds can be through the involvement and association and connecting and utilizing the services of legal practitioners in civil society. They may themselves be human rights defenders. and involve them in legal aid work, expand the work of legal clinics in the national law universities and law colleges. This means that there needs to be focus in some areas where these lawyers specialize and work upon. These areas may not be handled often by legal aid fraternity. And we could start with perhaps specialized services for prisoners, especially vulnerable groups, including women, youth, transgender persons, foreign national prisoners, FNPs. These need to be rolled out. And I think some of those who are fighting these cases as civil society people could be involved in and assist the uh, State Legal Services Authority and its units in doing so. Let me close with a story out of a place which is as small as Manipur, and as far away from Manipur as is possible to get. It's Fiji. Yet it has great relevance to our country. I had shared it 2 days ago with a group of senior serving and retired police officers, and they were very responsive to it. And I hope you will be too. And the approach is that policy changes can be brought about at the level of the police stations by local initiatives. We have all we know about the golden hour as far as a cardiac arrest or a heart attack is concerned. That is the first hour after a heart attack. It is the most crucial because the patient needs to be given assistance by a responder and taken to a medical facility on time. In Fiji, they bring this approach to the police station. Anybody who's brought to the police station after arrest or has been charged is not to be questioned until the legal aid lawyer is present. Well, what's new in that, you will say? But that lawyer is supposed to reach that station within the hour, that first hour. That is the rule of the golden hour. Think of it. If we could have grievance
was more or less coming to the conclusion of his statement. I think he has covered his personal experiences of coming to Manipur. Starting from, of course, the Jivan Reddy Commission, which all of us remember, and also his experience of going through the India Justice Report and how Manipur as a state fared in it, and several challenges that the institutions of police, prison, legal aids have suffered. And also the challenges in which they are grappling with has been highlighted very well. And that lovely story from Fiji, all the way across the ocean, of how legal aids clinic and the police play a very critical role in making a difference by ensuring that legal aid lawyers are present within an hour, and that access to justice will be meaningful and alive for the people who are coming in confrontation with the law enforcement officials. Again, we are really grateful to him for sparing his valuable time. I know he's a very busy person with lot of commitments, not just for the Northeast region, as we dearly call him, but for the whole Commonwealth countries. and we are really grateful that you could spare time with us and on this very important day of the International Human Rights Day. But without much ado, I would like to go straight to Alana. Alana, again, doesn't need an introduction. I have already done a long introduction. But the good short is someone who have the concern of the people of the Northeast at her heart, and also looking it from the gender lens of a women, and someone who has spared no effort to bring about a dignified life for the people in the Northeast, in the metropolitan cities, including Delhi. Alana, the floor is yours now for the second time. Hope the internet connection is kind to us and will not take you away immediately again. Floor is yours, Alana.
Yeah, very sorry and for the inconveniences. But Bablu, thank you very much for the kind and generous introduction. And I'd like to thank all of you, Manipur State Legal Services Authority, Human Rights Alert, the member secretary, the deputy secretary, and all the team, who have made this panel discussion possible. And also it's a pleasure to be together with Sanjay Da, who has been a mentor, who has been so patient and, have been always guiding us with his, immense knowledge in this journey. Like mine is really like on the topic of racial discrimination, which is linked to coronavirus. I know I have made my own video on this. I've been, talking to the media. I've been sharing about this. But yes, it is extremely important because let me just point out some of the facts so that we know how to access justice, based on all the grievances and the problems faced by, people like us who look Mongoloid and who have these racial features, who are very much, part of the country, but at the same time, who have been mistaken, for our features. So let me just go to some of the cases because this is also my experiences, which I have directly intervened. Let me just go straight to the point that it started from the educational institutions. When the cases of coronavirus, COVID-19 was, reported at the end of January in India. It has started actually in the first part of February, like calling names. This started with mocking, then spitting, misconceptions, misinformation. So all these things started, and it started in a very reputed colleges and universities where kids started calling the Northeast children, hey, coronavirus. And then also actually it started in a college canteen. It started in a university canteen. So this is something which has started from some educational institutions. And here I would like to bring in that women are actually at the receiving end, and women are the actually most affected ones when these things happened. Like, when it was actually in the university campus where bikers came and they threw balloons, because these are shocking stories. Now they were talking, but that time was actually quite, it was a trauma for those people who had gone through this problem. So these are all facts that had come to me. And so they throw balloons in their private parts, and they started calling them coronavirus. But what kind of law is there actually to protect or to penalize these guys? So anyway, easily they escaped, or they are actually scot-free. So now how a young woman was spat upon, with a pan and called her coronavirus. And the same thing happened in Mumbai. The first incident was in Delhi. The second incident was in Mumbai, where a young woman was spat upon again by a biker, and then and then zoom away. And then I had a lot of trolling, a lot of abuses in social media, which women have complained. They started calling them, they started trolling them, they started giving them false promises. There is also a chat platform where women are lured, to come on online and to do all these things. So we started handling all these cases. Now, again, when you talk about the eviction, that is call I would like to mention. During the pandemic time, it was like homeless for them, penniless, homeless, and jobless. So now the eviction is one thing. Eviction is kicked out in the middle of the night, and our young women were picking up their things and crying, and telling us that please send us home, that we cannot can no longer stay here. So that was actually happening in the capital of India, and we're so helpless. I don't know, this pandemic may be the first time ever, and I'm not sure if it will come again, but also, yes, like Bablu mentioned, that it is for all of us to live with it and also to learn, from this experience. So the other eviction is actually for being suspected to be carriers of this coronavirus. Or you have heard how two women were evicted in Gujarat, and told them to leave the house and say that you're spreading, the virus in our apartments, in our society. Then you have heard about the cases in Bangalore where 6 girls from Nagaland, in the middle of the night, it was at midnight, where a neighbor barged into the house where the girls were in their 90s, when they are not even appropriately dressed, and then the guy was actually shooting video and say that you people are actually spreading the virus, and the next morning you have to leave the apartment. So now what the girls were saying was that they had rushed to they informed the police came, but the police also turned on the side of that, turned hostile, and he was in support of the neighbor. So in that case, they were saying that it is not okay, because the trauma that we had gone through, maybe the problem may stop here, then maybe, but then we'll never forget, and this will last, this will stay with us forever. So that itself is actually a trauma that that gone through. Now you saw in Punjab how 9 women from Nagaland were locked inside by the house owner because their employer was supposed to pay rent, but the employer stopped paying, so they were kept like a ransom. But some organization, Good Samaritan, came and rescued them, and they were let out. For a week they were without food, they were without any ration, nothing, but they were just locked inside like that. And also you have heard about the forcible quarantine that happened started in Gujarat, where 9 youths from Nagaland were fully dragged out from the apartment, and they were forcefully quarantined with people who are suspected to be of COVID positive, who were coughing the whole night, so they were kept there. And only after their video went viral, police intervened, and that's how they were taken out from the quarantine center. You also have heard about the 7 youth from Mizoram, again, who were dragged out, from the apartment, and they were forcefully detained for many hours. And they called me up and they said, "Ma'am, when are you going to let us out? When are you coming to help us?" The cries that come to us still echoes in my ears. So these are not movies, these are not something that we are making up, but the cases cannot be manufactured, but these are the real thing which happened during that time. So I was coordinating for hours and hours. They were without food, they were without water for a long time. And then when I say about they were kicked out by the employer, this is just only the tip, but then 6 guys from Nagaland were kicked out by their employer, and then they were beaten very badly, and then that was in the middle of the night. So we said, "Do you like to go ahead and file a complaint?" They said, "No, we're scared to file a complaint." And at this time, in this pandemic lockdown time, nobody will listen to us, and we don't want to go and file a complaint, but we just want a ration, and we want a place to stay. So that was only their request was. So accordingly, we tried and arranged for them. And also, actually, you have seen the way what happened in hospitals. The hospital in Kolkata, where more than 300 nurses from Manipur were compelled to give a resignation because they were assigned duties where in a place where many positive people were there, but they are not even informed. They were not given protective measures. They were not given anything, to them to prevent themselves from this. So that's how actually they were compelled, and then they had to resign, and then they also face a lot of racial discrimination, racially motivated, harassment, where they're also being called coronavirus. So this is how which happened. Then you have a case of how the 2 students from Nagaland, the other 2 students from Manipur were denied entry in a supermarket. They were denied groceries, where so even if one goes and file a complaint, I mean, where and under which section and how will they go ahead? So, there's a lot of glass ceilings. There's a lot of hurdles, in going ahead and filing a complaint. And also there's a lot of fake recruitments, especially for our young boys and girls. They are so vulnerable. And the appointment letter, that they have given to them was like per annum, they're given lakhs of rupees. And then it was, in the employment letter, it was written, you'll get an iPad, you'll get an iPhone, you'll get all this. So that kind of, the vulnerability that we're exposed to, how difficult it is actually, to handle that. And so, they are also physically and mentally affected. And one case is that, like, there is an abetment to suicide, which is completely a mental health issue. A young guy from Meghalaya, he committed suicide, who was working in a food court in Agra. And he had written completely that I blame my employer because she stopped paying my salary. So, but then the boy was brought to Delhi, he was buried, but then nobody took up the case. And then, of course, a young youth from Manipur jumped off in Munirka in Delhi, and then he committed suicide. Then you have heard about a young man again from Nagaland who committed suicide in Mumbai. So, all these things. And then a young woman from Nagaland was unwell, but the kind of, because psychologically they are affected and they have been called coronavirus. And so that's why they are so scared even to stay back. So a young woman was unwell, and then we actually stopped her that you should not go, you rest. But then she wanted to go home. She said, even if I die, I'd like to go home and die. So that's how she packed her things, and she was traveling back to Nagaland on a Shramik special train that was arranged by the government to take all the returnees home. And then she died, unfortunately, on the way when they were crossing UP. So, and also, unfortunately, we also have some HIV patient, but then to procure that, even ART had become so difficult. I had to really struggle to procure that ART for some women survivors. And 2 women, these are only cases which are reported. I am sure there must be many, who are from the Northeast. They died because they could not get the medicines, and also a lot of difficulties, a lot of stigma. So they fainted and then they died. So these are things that, that is the feeling of fear. And the feeling of fear means, like, fear of racial attacks, and then fear of this contracting the virus, then fear of loss of employment. You have the fear of hunger and homelessness. Then you have lots of uncertainties, but then at the same time, you're so uncertain, but you're like longing to go home. So that was actually that they're juggling between, like all these things during the pandemic lockdown. And now we have lost so much, during the lockdown, and yet we are yet to recover. But there's the only hope that I'm sure we will recover and come back stronger and better. So that is the only hope, but still we are in the recovering process. And I had written one article, for Henry Gold Foundation, that is called A Roadmap into an Uncertain Future, which is a strategies for protecting interest of Northeast returnees after lockdown. So I have spoken to more than 20 returnees, and also I have made some recommendations for the government and also for the concerned state governments and civil society on how to help assist, the returnees and also people who have been really affected. So these are still going on, and the impact is so big that, it will really, really take time. And so how do we go about it, and what needs to be done? Of course, a lot. We have given lots of recommendations. And during the lockdown, I had written to the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is the monitoring committee, and then one directives came out regarding the racial harassment. But in spite of this, I know the mindset, so people are not really following it. So it is continuing. So what needs to be done is that we really need the systems and policies in place to tackle this problem. We need to come out with more directives, by the concerned departments and the ministries. We need in this time, because all the help websites given, all the helplines number were completely defunct. Nobody is reachable, no nodal officers to, to reach out to address these grievances. A lot of, gaps in between. So I think we need to bridge this also. The role of bhavans also is very important. They can be more proactive and also coordinated more with the civil society and the concerned organizations or communities, so that we can handle more of this. So we need a lot of things to do, in this regard. And also one thing I'd like to say is that we need appropriate law to penalize those perpetrators, because when it comes to that spitting case, for the young girl, they have registered under 509 IPC, which is a word or gesture or act intended to insult the modesty of a woman. So which is not enough. So within 24 hours, the perpetrator was actually released on bail. So that's how it is. That's why I think we are actually also asking, as part of the monitoring committee, that we should amend, which has been already suggested by the Besbora committee report, to amend IPC 153. That is to have 153C. And also can be, if it is not in the main text, it can be as an illustrations where they can put as if anybody is being called Chinky, Chowmin, Momo, or Chinese, or any derogatory terms because of their background, cultural background, or anything, then it has to be a cognizable offense. So we need some kind of exemplary actions. Because if I'm being called that kind of names, and if I have to go and lodge a complaint in the police station, then there is no evidence to prove enough that I've been called this and that. So because at the court, you have to show evidence. So this goes like that. That is why 90% of our Northeast boys and girls, they don't get justice. So this has actually completely discouraged them or derailed them to on going ahead and filing an FIR. And I encourage them actually to file more complaints so that cases, and then we can take it up. But then many of them they know that the justice delivery system, a lot of things fail. That is why they don't want to go ahead. So maybe I think we need to look at that, and also for us, also in the Northeast, in the state Northeast region, to be more prepared, for anything. So I think we need to work together, even with the police, also with the concerned government, with the concerned departments, and more collaborations. More collective efforts is much better. So I think when we're together, we are stronger. So I just end here with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alana, for the very comprehensive presentation. There was a time when people took this act of racial discrimination very lightly, and there was a general shyness for people to even talk about it. I think you guys have made a big difference by meticulously documenting them. I'm sure perhaps you would be the most competent person to be able to narrate all these episodes from different parts of India and put it together in perspective. This could be very new to many of our viewers themselves. And I also understand that, and thank you very much for presenting also not just the problem, but the solutions and the various efforts and endeavors that you and your team is trying to make on this. Absolutely, I would like to salute you for this very critical work, which has been much needed. We all talk about national integration, whereas the people are treated with such humiliating experiences, and the general shyness with which people from the Northeast try to just bury it under the carpet is now finally out in the open. Also, now there are very clear recommendations that Base Barua report has made, and I also understand that you are one of the petitioners who are trying to implement these recommendations. Unfortunately, though, we still don't have a penal provision that looks specifically into the racial discrimination issue, and I'm sure you can even talk about it during the interactive session. Is Sanjay online? He also sent me a message that he would like to take 2 minutes before some issues that he was not able to communicate in the end of his presentation. But looks like he's still not online. So we will wait for him and see if it is possible to make his final closing word at some point. So we have heard a kind of a regional and even a global perspective from Sanjay Da. We have also heard from the experience of the outsiders from the Northeast in the other parts of the country and the kind of discrimination that we have experienced. Now we will come to the very what they call the ground zero, what is happening in our own home state in Manipur. And Sorokhaivan Sadananda, again, I would like to introduce him formally. He has passed out BA LLB honors from the Department of Law, Northeast Hill University, Shillong, in the year 2012. Practiced for more than 3 years in the courts in Manipur with a leaning towards the criminal matters. Assisted the Special Counsel of CBI in some of the high-profile cases of Manipur, served in the Ministry of Home Affairs for some time before eventually joining the Manipur Judicial Service in 2017. In the capacity of Civil Judge Junior Division, held the post of Civil Judge Junior Division, Judicial Magistrate First Class of Thawbal and Jiribam, before his current position as the Deputy Member Secretary of the Manipur State Legal Services Authority. That was the formal introduction. But the informal introduction that I would like to share is any victim any people that have gone for help to MASLSA have always a nice word to say about Sadananda. He is committed to legal aid services, and people feel that he has the motivation and the dedication. It's not just a job for him, but also someone who goes way out to help victims. So he is going to present on the various efforts, and I must definitely say that the as activists who's looking from outside, the Manipur Legal Aid Services Authority have done yeoman service during the present COVID crisis, and Sadananda would be the most competent person to talk about the endeavors of the legal services institution during the COVID-19 pandemic. So over to you, Sadananda, for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Babu, for the wonderful introduction for me. I think it's a little exaggerated, to say the least. First of all, I would like to it is indeed an honor for me to be in the presence of such versatile and renowned personalities, both online as well as present in person today. So both the panelists, respected Sri Sanjoy Hazarika, have spoken in length about the barriers to the access to justice we normally face, and he have talked in detail about the facilities lacking in the judiciary as well and overall in the state machinery. Then our respected panelist, Dr. Alana, have talked in detail about her experiences actually about the discrimination faced by the people of our color or race, I would say race, during this COVID pandemic. So in fact, I have, as far as I'm concerned, I have learned a lot today from those wonderful perspectives, insights they have to offer, all the panelists have to offer, and as well. Before I begin, I would like to say this COVID pandemic has no doubt thrown a curveball which nobody had truly expected. But you know, as like this is excuse me.
Make a small intervention, Sadananda. Your visual is not going very well. Can we exchange the set? If you can come over here. And sorry, because of the light.
Sorry for the slight interruption. Yes, I was saying like COVID pandemic has aggravated the issues we normally face, and it has pushed further into the background, I would like to say. But as life goes on, as Heraclitus has once observed, if it were not for the injustice, like men would never know justice. So I think it also has provided us an opportunity to bring forth the issues, the long-pending issues we have been facing today, to back into the foreground so that we can address the same to the best possible extent possible. As far as I'm concerned, as far as the endeavors of the legal service institutions are concerned during this COVID pandemic, I would like to highlight a few of the endeavors we have undertaken. I would like to start off in a chronological order, actually. First of all, as per the direction of the Honorable Supreme Court, the Supreme Court had taken upon themselves to take up such preventive measures for the prisoners lodged in for all the prisoners. So they have, in a suo motu case, they have instructed all the states to form a high-powered committee to oversee the release of the prisoners in an effort to decongest the prisons in the wake of this COVID pandemic. As in pursuance of that directive, we had also formed a High Power Committee, chaired by the Honorable Executive Chairman of the Manipur State Legal Services Authority on March 25th itself. That is the day on which the nationwide lockdown started. We had our first meeting. The first meeting of the High Power Committee was held on the 31st March 2020. In the first meeting itself, instructions were issued to the State Home Department to make a separate quarantine prison, especially for the prisoners. The state government was directed to notify a place which was to be a separate quarantine prison. Then, apart from that, the Director General of Police was also directed to issue instructions to all his police personnel to strictly comply with the provisions of arrest and detention relating to the Section 41, 42, 43 of the CRPC Criminal Procedure Code as well, and about the provisions of the bail in case of bailable offences. This was all done this was all done so that unnecessary arrest and prevention could have been avoided at least. It was also in compliance with the direction of the National Legal Service Authority, who had framed actually a guidelines on preventing unnecessary arrest and detention, which was formulated last year, titled MASLSA's Early Access to Justice Scheme. Sri Sanjoy Hazarika had already talked about the how we have to prevent unnecessary arrest and detention, and this MASLSA's Early Access to Justice Scheme intends to address that issue, for which I'll be talking after some time. Then coming back, after that High Power Committee meeting, two other meetings was held in the month of April itself, and where 178 under trial prisoners and 3 convicts were recommended for release on interim bail and parole respectively. The criteria for the releasing such prisoners was made on the basis that the focus was given on the prisoners who were charged with less serious offences and who are lying in prisons due to the non-furnishing of the surety bonds only. So during the subsequent meetings of the High Power Committee, discretion was given to the courts finally after 3 or 6 months to make the interim bails absolute, because most of them have been lying in the prisons only due to the non-furnishing of the surety bonds only. So apart from that, in the first or the second week of the April 2020 this year, we came to know of the various news from the local media which highlighted that the various issues, the various plights, the sufferings which were faced by the people of northeastern India, and more particularly from Manipur, because of the lockdown that ensued. So in an effort to address this issue, we had written a request to we had requested all the state legal services authorities all across India to kindly give us possible help and assistance during these times of the pandemic. This was also necessitated by the fact that the reports were being circulated in the media about the racial discrimination which was being faced by the people of our region. So the response has been quite phenomenal, to say the least, from all the state legal services authority. As far as the question of the racial discrimination has been concerned, there were most of the district legal services authority all across the country had tied up with the police administration as well as the district administration to give us relief materials and other assistance as far as possible. In fact, regarding this, our state government had also started a wonderful initiative in this regard called the Tengbang Initiative, in which the people from all the states were able to register in this platform. So from there, we are also able to procure the data of all the stranded individuals along with their contact details and everything. From that state government, we managed to procure about a list of around 17,000 people, which included a list of students, working professionals, as well as patients and other persons who were stranded due to the sudden lockdown that was called on 25th March. we also managed to reach out to about 2,000 plus people who contacted us for providing such assistance and relief, who are stranded across different states, irrespective of whether they registered on Tengbang or not. Some of the instances have been quite an eye-opening for me also. Like through this initiative, I came to know like some lady of Manipur is working as a teacher in some obscure town of the Madhya Pradesh near Bhopal. Then I came to know like there is almost a colony of the workers from Manipur who are blue-collar workers who are now settled in one of the southern states of India. Then there were people who went for a Bharat trip, for Vrindavan trip, and who cannot come back to Manipur on account of the lockdown. Then I also came to know about those private persons who went in their private vehicles and who are coming back from different parts of India, but were stuck in one state or the other due to the lockdown. So we were trying to provide as much as help as we can by tying up with the district legal services authorities of all the other states. Then there were also, and when the special started operating, some of the returnees, they were having problems in conveyance from the place of stay to the railway station. So some of them asked for the help. So we were able to provide transportation from the place of stay to the railway station as well by tying up with the district legal services authority. In the month of February, I would like to highlight that all the paralegal volunteers and all the relatives are very much involved in all the relief efforts. Because those were the times because of the sudden lockdown and people were not having, people were lost their daily livelihood and were not having enough for assistance. So all together, in Manipur itself, we were able to provide help to around 30,000 people who consist of the marginalized families as well. And apart from that, around 7,000, I think, 7,000 migrant workers and students from outside have provided such assistance. And also from the side of the Manipur State Legal Services Authority. In fact, the help was provided by the paralegal volunteers and the medical advocates and the legal experts who are working in the grassroots level. Apart from that, we managed to reach out to around 4,000 frontline warriors during the month of April itself. This consists of the truck drivers, sanitation workers, then traffic policemen, selected traffic policemen, then police personnel, and newspaper hawkers. And they were supplied with many kits and provided some help advisories regarding the pandemic. So these were some of the efforts we did in the month of April itself. Then when we come the month of May, and this became very interesting in the month of May. There were two initiatives I would like to highlight in this regard the month of May and June. One was regarding the problems that violations faced by the drug addicts. We came to know about from the newspaper reports about the human rights violations of the drug addicts in their rehabilitation centers. And this unfortunately resulted in the death of a man in the rehabilitation center. So regarding that, we had to contact the organization and to procure the details, and there were actually enough clear details. And we came to know that this was not the first time that such instances were happening in this privately run rehabilitation center. In fact, over the course of the 10 years, more than 20 documented instances have occurred, and this was a huge human rights issue which I came to know about it. So then on further inquiry, we came to know that Manipur has an official figure of around 34,000 drug and substance users today, but there are only 21 government-funded rehabilitation centers and 52 centers are privately run. So in fact, the number is very low in comparison with the number of the victims of the drug and substance abuse as today. But so apart from that, these centers they don't have any legal regulatory framework or guidelines governing this institution. So they have without any legal framework or rules and regulations, they were functioning on their own. So and the community organizations highlighted that because in the absence of such regulatory framework, the human rights violations were continuing to occur and will and is bound to occur for all the time. So as an effort to prevent such violations, and public interest litigation was filed in the High Court of Manipur, praying for the regularization of such privately run rehabilitation centers. No doubt the privately run rehabilitation centers are, some of them are working very well, and without their existence, it's not possible to provide the services, the rehabilitation services which are being offered. So the High Court of Manipur has been pleased to dispose of the public interest litigation in the month of July 2020 with direction to the state government to frame state-specific guidelines regarding the rehabilitation of the privately run drug rehabilitation centers. In fact, the state government was given 3 months' time to frame such state-specific guidelines. In fact, I have been told that no such guidelines have been framed till now, and the community organization have approached Manipur State Legal Services Authority for further course of action again. Apart from that, another interesting initiative I would like to highlight is in the month of May, there was a very good order and judgment of the High Court of Manipur regarding the distribution of the ration foods under the National Food Security Act. In fact, it was an initiative which was been taken up by Tamo Bablu and the Human Rights Alert, who's filed a public interest litigation in the High Court regarding the irregularities in the distribution of the ration items under the National Food Security Act. The High Court of Manipur was pleased to pass an order directing that only those authorities which have been specified under the National Food Security Act are to distribute the ration items, the distribution of food and other materials during this COVID pandemic. In fact, the High Court went further to acknowledge the efforts of the local clubs, Mera Paibis, and legal aid clinics and paralegal volunteers as well. In fact, they gave legal validity to the efforts they have been taking up till now by stating that in case of any complaint, in case of any irregularity, or in case like the person is not receiving the ration ration or food items which is his or her right, then they are free to approach any club, any Mera Paibi or any legal aid clinic for lodging the complaint about this non-receipt or irregularity. In consequence of that, the Human Rights Alert led by Tamo Bablu have been instrumental in disseminating the awareness regarding the right to food under the National Food Security Act, and they have in fact published a translated copy of the judgment in the Manipuri dialect as well, and a short film has also been produced by them, so that more people are aware of their right to food under the National Food Security Act. In fact, I think as soon as the COVID pandemic subsides, I think many people in Manipur will be aware of their right to food under the National Food Security Act, and finally realize that it's not an act of distribution of food under the right to food National Food Security Act. It's not an act of magnanimity of any person. In fact, it is our right, and if we are not receiving it, we are entitled to complain about it. Apart from that, in the month of June, when the lockdown finally ended and the COVID really hit Manipur, in that time, there was a paradigm shift in the functioning of the legal service institutions in Manipur also. We completely shifted to virtual mode in all the functionings, in all our functionings. In fact, so all our normal operations, we focused on the online mode. Regarding that, I would like to highlight some of the initiatives we have taken up. First is all the capacity building programs, all the training programs, all the awareness programs were held in the virtual mode, in online mode. Then even for the Lok Adalat, we started having online lok adalat. We had already held 2 lok adalat, online lok adalat till now, and the third one we are having day after tomorrow. Then we are having in this fact, I would like to highlight another online initiative, which I think it should be highlighted, is the development of one prisoner database management portal, which Manipur State Legal Services Authority have developed in-house by one of our staff. This prisoner database management portal will be providing real-time information of all the prisoners of Manipur for all the authorized persons. For the authorized persons here will include the jail authorities, the courts, the judges, the prisoners themselves, and the jail staff. So in fact, if any of these authorized persons want to see the data of any prisoner at any point of the time, they can simply log into this portal and can find all the details there. Even for the prisoners themselves also, they can log into the this portal, for which 2 kiosk machines have been provided in the 2 jails of the Manipur by Manipur State Legal Services Authority, where they can log in to see the details of the case, the progress of the case, if the case is pending in the court, or the period of the incarceration in the prisons, whether he is an under trial prisoner or he is a convict. So this will result in a free sharing of information and between the authorized persons. In fact, this prisoner database management portal goes one step further than the interoperable criminal justice system, which has been now in the developing stage of India. I think right now in India, the interoperable criminal justice system (ICJS) is functional only in the state of the Andhra Pradesh, but for them also they are not able to procure data from the jails. So in fact, as this prisoner database management portal, which has been developed by Manipur State Legal Services Authority, and which has been developed from the perspective of providing effective legal aid, it goes a way further to say that the prisoner can now see their own data, can see their own cases, progress of the case from this portal. Then, apart from this prisoner database management portal, as our respected panelists had highlighted before, Sri Sanjoy Hazarika had said before, regarding the preventing unnecessary arrest and detention, which is in relation with the NALSA's National Legal Services Authority's Early Access to Justice Scheme. The scheme, which was launched last year by NALSA, aims to provide effective legal aid at the time of pre-arrest, arrest, and after arrest is, like even before a person is arrested, NALSA has issued instruction that he should be provided effective legal aid even before arrest. This is all has been done to prevent unnecessary arrest and detention, because in India, or far as or in Manipur is concerned, there has been a lot of unnecessary arrest and detention which have been going on till now. So in order to give effective implementation of this program, we have already organized meeting, a meeting with all the stakeholders, including the Assam Rifles and all the paramilitary forces and CAPF in the last year. But we have developed, we have tied up with Manipur Police Training Academy also regarding that. Then we have also done an online program for a training program for all the paralegal volunteers, penal advocates as well. And after that, in this year after the COVID pandemic hits, all the 128 police stations of the Manipur had nominated one nodal officer from each police station, who was to be the nodal officer for the effective implementation of this NALSA scheme. For them also, an online training program was held in the month of July 2020, and in collaboration with the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. Regarding the program, some 60 nodal officers, nominated nodal officers of the police stations participated in the program, along with their officers from the Manipur Police Training College and a nodal officer of the IGP rank as well. Regarding the program, we have highlighted the need to for all the police personnel to comply with the provisions of the Criminal Procedure Code relating to arrest and detention and of bail in bailable offences. And though even though there is still a long way to go, I think a start has been made in this regard. And in fact, I think with the continuing support of everyone, when everyone is properly aware of their rights, I think this scheme, as envisioned by NALSA, will be a success in the end. Apart from that, I want to highlight one more issue, one final issue. I want to highlight one endeavor we have taken up. It's regarding the pendency of the cases and alternative dispute redressal mechanisms. For this, I would like to take the example of the state of Singapore, country of Singapore, which was placed in a similar situation in the 1990s with a similar legal system like India. Regarding that, Singapore was placed in a similar situation in like India in the 1990s. They are facing a huge pendency of the cases in that time. So what Singapore did at that time, by the turn of the century, was threefold actually. First of all, they tried to increase the strength of the judges all across the country. Then they developed the infrastructure, necessary infrastructure required. Then the uses of the technology was to the optimum level. Then the third one was the use of the alternative dispute redressal mechanisms for the effective dispensation of justice. So, as the first and second point are concerned, it's outside the purview of the legal service authorities. But as far as the third point is concerned, regarding the promotion of the alternative dispute redressal mechanism, it comes within the purview of this state legal service institutions and authorities. So regarding that, we have taken up some initiatives in this regard, and primarily, apart from organizing long adalats, we have tried to focus on the mediation aspect, mediation. Because Manipur, even before the pre-colonial times, had a well-developed legal system, and one of the courts which was functioning in Manipur in those times was the village court, which was able to settle the disputes on the basis of the mutual understanding of the parties, and for petty and minor and less serious offences or issues. So, taking a leaf out of that system we had in place long time ago, we try to focus on developing the method of arbitrary mediation in our state. So, for that we have already organized an online mediation also, and an online capacity building program, and advanced online capacity building program for the 21 advocate mediators of Manipur have also been organized in collaboration from the MPC Mediation Project and Counseling Committee of the Supreme Court of India. Apart from that, these are some of the initiatives which have been taken up. In fact, I would not say that these are the achievements of sort, because as far as I'm concerned, we have still a long way to go. And Manipur, as far as concerned, there are around 6,000 cases pending in all the courts of Manipur. As far as civil cases are concerned, there are around 3,500 cases. Of them, these are the data procured from the National Judicial Data Grid. From that data grid, we can see that from the 3,500 cases of Manipur pending in the courts of Manipur, almost around 2,700 cases of those cases are pending at the hearing stage, which requires no real intervention, adjudication from the courts and the judges. I think if the people are made more aware of the availability of the mediation as an alternative means of dispute resolution, I think most of these 2,700 cases can be referred through mediation and can be settled amicably as well. Apart from that, I hope there is one issue, final issue, which I want to highlight. This is regarding the women, because we are regarding this in this COVID pandemic. Everybody knows, like almost everyone knows, like the issues of the women has been aggravated to a great extent. But regarding this, National Legal Service Authority have also directed to depute one panel advocates to all the one-stop centers of all Manipur. Accordingly, we have deputed the same. But as far as the official figure is concerned, during this COVID pandemic, till the lockdown was lifted, only 44 cases was registered in such one-stop centers, and amongst them, on 4 or 5 of them have been resulted in the filing of the domestic violence cases in the courts. So, but we know that the issues which are being faced by the women today has been aggravated during this pandemic. This is one area which I want to flag off, and which I think which really needs serious intervention from all quarters. So with this, I would like to thank again Natamo Bablu for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sadananda, for that very elaborate, comprehensive, and positive presentation. So I was not wrong when I initially introduced you that you in some way embody the spirit of the legal aids and also the passion with which you do your work, not only highlighting your programs and the initiatives that you took up during the times of COVID, but also spanning, looking at Singapore as a model, but also looking deep into our own historical processes, which unfortunately has been buried once we have adopted the colonial Anglo-Saxon legal system, and somehow we have discarded it for a very long time. But before we move on to the next interactive session, Sanjay Da had just missed mentioning few critical points because of the technology. So I would like to request Sanjay Da to kindly have your final word. You started the discussion. Perhaps you have also the right, or perhaps you are destined to also conclude the presentation. So why don't you take 2 more minutes to ensure that your points are made clear and loud.
Thank you, Bablu. Actually, the connection is at the end of the session far better than it's ever been. I've never had such technological issues at any time, but I'm glad we are able to resolve them. I just had a couple of points. I was very happy to hear from Mr. Sadaranda of the progressive steps taken by the Manipur Legal State Authority, Services Authority, and the many issues in which they are looking at mediation, dispute resolution, and mitigation of issues. And these few thousand cases which are before the courts could be resolved through that process. I'm very glad he also referred to the violence, domestic violence against women, violence against intimate partners, because this is actually the hidden pandemic. This is the pandemic which has always existed, but we haven't paid enough attention to it. And now it has become far worse because people are locked in spaces where they are unsafe. Children, as well as women and partners who are facing abusive partners, whether they're married or not. So this is something that we really must always keep our ears to the ground and be in close touch with groups which are working on these critical issues. That having been said, I don't know which part of my talk disappeared, but I will just make 2 last points, which is that I think your called the deputy director of the Legal Services Authority spoke about Singapore's example. I gave Fiji's example. I don't know if that was
Yes,
heard.
you were
I
lost
don't want
around that
to
Fiji example.
repeat that.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, so the Fiji example is this. It's like this. There is something that we all know as the golden hour, when a person has a heart attack, and there is a golden hour when the first responder can be a member of the family, a friend, a colleague, and the person is rushed to a hospital, a medical facility. Within the first hour, the life can be saved of a person having a heart attack. Similarly, to deal with issues of custodial violence, illegal detention, and so on, it is that first hour at a police station that counts. I call that the golden hour. And it is that if we are able to develop, Fiji has developed a law by which a person who is brought to a police station, arrested, charged, whatever, is not supposed to say anything until a legal aid or lawyer is present. Now, that may be nothing new, but the point is that it is in the first hour that that lawyer has to reach. And everything from the statement of the accused, the lawyer's intervention, the remarks of the police, whatever is written, everything is videographed and a copy is given to the defendant. That, I think, if we are able to do that in police stations across the state, start with a pilot, but if you're able to bring this first golden hour in, and you're able to build in the processes of grievance cells and enable civil society lawyers who are in civil, like Bablu himself and others who are very well-known lawyers and have driven stellar, in a way, cases, which we all know about. Bring them in, because this is a time when the legal aid budgets have been slashed. So what is your recourse? The recourse is to bring in people from civil society or practicing lawyers who can partner and work with the State Legal Services Authority, district civil societies, service authorities on some of the issues that are not familiar to, it may be on issues of transgenders in prison, LGBTQI. There are specific areas that people work on. And I think this could be a way of bringing together civil society and the State Legal Services Authority, districts, DSLAs, in order to build a partnership that will be strong, robust, and help ordinary people on the ground and build that bridge of trust, which will create greater deliverance of justice through empathy and following the law. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Sanjayda, again, for those final words of wisdom. In fact, even as we were discussing, even as we were waiting for the meeting to begin, this was exactly the issue that our Honorable Member Secretary was referring to, the gradual slashing of the funds for the Legal Services Authority and the future of how we are going to see this. And as Sadananda has pointed out very clearly, that there is a willingness and an energy and an intention to do a lot of work, whereas the reversed is happening because of the cutting down of the fund. And I think in a way, this kind of partnership that we are seeing today in terms of a partnering with civil society, this is very new to us as well. In fact, Human Rights Alert has been struggling in our own ways. And we are very glad to see that there is a new partnership that is emerging, not only today, but also right from the day we have got this beautiful judgment from the High Court on the right to food. The MASLSA has been extremely helpful in walking hand in hand with the civil society. I think some of these old inhibitions needs to be shred away, and we need to really work closely in tandem, because ultimately what we are all looking forward is some relief for the victims, some changes of a system in which we are all caught up in. As they say, it is better to light the candle than to curse the darkness. We all know the darkness too long. It is about time that we start seeing how is it that we lit the way for the people, particularly the marginalized and the poor, can have some access to justice. They have all experienced the majesty of the state. They have all experienced how strong and ruthless the military can be, as Sanjay Da have said. It's about time that the ordinary people would also have a sense of justice that the Constitution can deliver, that the Human Rights Declaration can deliver, that the governance, which was so painstakingly built and crafted with lots of effort, should have some meaning to the last people who are suffering at the end. And there, definitely, the State Legal Services Authority, the District Legal Services Authority, and the civil society, the pro bono lawyers, have a huge role to play. Thank you very much, Sanjay Da, for ending the discussion on that note. We don't have too much time, but we still have about 10 minutes for interaction. And there were already a few questions that has come up from the through the social media, through the YouTube. One of them is citing the example of the recent murder by a very well-known public personality called Molecule. So people are asking, how come? Do we have a copy of the? Is Sujata is around? Yes. Yeah. As seen in the Molecule shooting case, even in the serious cases of attempt to murder and criminal intimidation, FIR registration does not ensure initiation of investigation unless and until the victim is well linked. This is a kind of a chronic crisis. Would Sadananda like to respond? How could we as legal aids clinics or the Legal Aid Services Authority respond to this kind of manipulation of system or criminal justice not functioning properly, and criminal justice caving into political pressure rather than a rule of law as we understand that should be applied across the board, whether you are rich, poor, strong or weak. Sadananda, maybe you might be the right person to respond to this question.
Thank you, Tamo Bablu. Regarding this question, I would like to say, there is a plethora of Supreme Court judgments, to say the least, for criminal, when an FIR should be lodged, has to be registered. If it is not registered, again, disciplinary action as well as cases can be filed against the erring police personnel. So there's an inbuilt mechanism already we have in place. It's not about that. The problem is not about the law. The law is already there. Enough safeguard is there for the law for such not registration of the FIR. As far as this particular question, even in serious cases of attempt to murder and criminal intimidation, FIR registration doesn't ensure initiation of investigation unless the victim is well linked. First of all, I would like to say it's not the case all the time. There might be one-off issues when such things happen, but it is not the issue at all the times. If this is the issue which happens at all the times, there will be a complete failure of the criminal justice system or police system as well. But if we want to prevent such occurrences, as a part of that, we are doing the training, capacity building programs, sensitization programs, not only for the paralegal volunteers or the advocates as well, but even for the police personnel, we are organizing such programs from time to time from the side of the Legal Service Authority. Apart from that, we would like to highlight that it also requires complete empowerment of all people, that the people should know that what are their rights. That is the first step. That is the first and only step I would like to say, because unless the people knows what are their rights, we cannot help in empowerment or empowering them comes a bit too far. In fact, for a place like ours, which is we can say that almost all the people in Manipur are like the marginalized people. There are many instances when the people are not even aware of their rights. Forget that they are not even aware when they are not even aware of their rights, they don't even know when their rights are being violated. So in fact, we are doing as much as we can in trying to spread awareness of the rights of the people in an effort to empower them and to enable them as well, that the people cannot be denied of their rights, what is due to them. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you very much. The second question I would like to pick up is what is come up on the screen from Sarungbam Manganbi Chanu. I would like to address a question to the panelists today, including the moderator. One, we are learning that today's speakers address on the lack of officials in the judicial system. Is there a second question? Can you pull it up in the screen? Again, so this is about lack of officials in the judicial system. What do we do about it? Maybe Sanjay Da can pick it up from a policy perspective. There is a shortage of judges in this country. How are we going to handle this? Because ultimately, justice has to be delivered by the judges. And if there is not enough judges sitting and adjudicating, what is the way out? Sanjay Da.
Well, I think, yeah, hi. I think the important thing is here you have to have appointments. Appointments cannot be delayed to the judiciary, just as they cannot be delayed to other structures of the criminal justice system. But here you have a major, I'm not talking about just Manipur, but other states as well, have a major issue on not just vacancies, but also representations. And you can take a look at the 2019 report. It's on the website. It's called the India Justice Report 2019, which has numerous recommendations on what is to be done, including increasing the budget for the judiciary, including increasing the numbers, but also the budgets. So that is one way of dealing with it. But clearly, this has to be a priority of not just government, but of the highest court of the land. I don't know, Bablu, you may have some thoughts yourself, and perhaps Sadananda may want to say something on it, but briefly.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sanjay Da, for that very brief but succinct point. To me, I think I would like to think a little differently, because at the end of the day, we are confining justice too much to what Amartya Sen distinguished two types of justice. What the English term justice covers, in Sanskrit they say it covers two concepts. One is niti and the other one is nyay. Niti is about the rules, the laws, the conventions, the judgments, up there in the terms of structure and norms. But there is another experience which is perhaps a more psychosomatic experience of people who have undergone injustice, is nyay, the concept of how we live a just and fair life. Both of these is now, we understand it as a question of justice. And very often, many of the disputes have to be resolved through processes which are not steeply legalistic. And I think alternative, dispute resolution models, which also Sadananda has highlighted, are very critical. So when Justice Bhagavati and all have started this Lok Adalat, perhaps in a country as poor as India and as diverse as India, and where the development parameters are much less, transplanting lock, stock and barrel, whatever is there in the British Westminster model, perhaps will never be able to solve many of our justicial issues and questions. So I think, to me, as a human rights activist who work mostly in the grassroots and hardly seen in the courtroom, to me, one has to find out much more innovative ways of dealing with justice and justice issues. In many of the Western world, there are very interesting processes which has begun. For example, if you look at the juvenile justice system in New Zealand, they have a process called a family group counseling rather than a juvenile justice court, where taking from the Maori indigenous people's experiences, they have a very different way of resolving children's conflicts without necessarily taking them to the adversarial court. So India, with all its richness in terms of traditions and cultures, I feel very pained to see that many of the ways in which people dealt with their problems are thrown away as uncivilized or uncultured. And we are trying to squeeze in ourselves to a totally Anglo-Saxon model, which will perhaps never work. It'll work a few privileged class in the people, but not for the whole people. So I'm sorry if my proposal sounds a little radical, but I think it is important for us to look at our own cultures, our own institutions. Not that we should go back in time, but by fully respecting human rights in its modern form, we should also try and look at our own roots to be able to solve some of the present problems that we are confronted with. I see Sujata coming and trying to remind me of the time, and also perhaps a few questions.
Can I just say one thing?
Please go ahead.
Can I just say one thing? I agree completely with you. We have to have you have to have alternative, or you have to have alternative, and that's where I picked up from what Satananda said. You have to have alternative conflict resolution efforts, but that doesn't mean we can't do away with the system that exists. You have to increase the capacity of the courts to do justice, and you have to increase the numbers of people there. This other process can go on and reduce the caseload for heinous crimes or for major issues, obviously. But the two need to go together.
Thank you very much, Sanjita.
Bablu, can I just add something?
Please go ahead.
Can I just add something on that? Actually, I've been thinking about this, and I've also been sharing with my people there in Tamenglong, because you see the recent shootout in Tamenglong because of like some land issue, land acquisition and land issue within the community, within the village. So I was saying the mediation would be the best, redressal for this kind of thing, because we live within the community and we are such a closely knit society. And then, emotional healing is also extremely important, because if you go to the court, we're not like any other people and from other parts of India. No, we'll not be talking to each other forever when we have some kind of, judgment or whatever from the court, if we settle from the court. So I think mediation is extremely important, and we need to look to that. And I have written a very simplified booklet on arbitration. And then that is, of course, conciliation and arbitration, where mediation, everything is there. So that is not for a legal practitioner, but this is for a civil society and a common people. It's a very thin page. So if any of you are interested to continue with your legal awareness program, I think it will be very important to share that to the community and to the people. And I wish that this can also reach across the hills of Manipur or any other area, so that this can be taken care of. The other one also, I have written a simplified booklet of Domestic Violence Act 2005, and that also can be given during your legal awareness program. So if you are interested, you let me know how that can be.
Sure, definitely. Thank you very much for pointing us out.
Regarding the Tamo Bablu, I just want to add what Dr. Alana has said regarding the shootout incident at Tamenglong. We have a legal aid clinic in Nungba. Regarding the incident, they were actively involved in quelling the situation there. So they were able to at least bring some sort of peace between the parties at that time. That's just I want to.
Yeah, but we are also privileged to have among our midst some of our judges, senior judicial officers, and they also have an opinion on this. And we would like to request Sir Somorjit to kindly throw us some light on this issue.
Thank you, Tamo Bablu, for giving me this opportunity. I just want to share some views regarding the challenges faced, particularly in the northeastern India, regarding the access of justice. And as Tamo Bablu has stated that we need to adopt and look into the implementation of our age-old traditions and customs for dispute resolution mechanisms. But there are certain issues also. We need to look the things more deeper, because there's always a conflict between codified law and customary law. As we all know that under Article 13 of the Constitution of India, any law, including the customs and usages which are in conflict with the human rights, fundamental rights, are to be declared as null and void. And at the same time, the Constitution again gives certain protections for preservation of customs and usages being followed in different tribal communities, and even in the state of Nagaland, there's some portions of this CRPC is not applicable. It is very much there in the preliminary part of this CRPC. Now the issue is that there's seemingly a conflict between the codified law and customary laws. When I was judge of this Moray, I have heard that some tribal communities settle their issues even in the case of non-compoundable offenses, like rape. Rape is not a compoundable offense, but such type of offenses which are really serious and which are not compoundable as per Indian Penal Code are being settled within the community themselves. So we don't have a very organized justice administration system in the villages. So there arises certain issues like biasness. If the party, suppose if the rapist belongs to a very influential family in the village, then definitely justice is likely to be distorted. So at times, as the system is not organized in the villages, the customs and usages which are being followed in the villages are not up to the standard. So there is some difficulty in reconciliation between these codified laws and customary laws. So we have to strike a balance between these codified laws and the customary laws. This is the first issue and one of the basic challenges being faced, particularly in the state of Manipur. And second is that regarding the economic bottleneck, what we are facing to the access of justice, because to a person who is hungry, there's no meaning of law, no meaning of right, no meaning of justice. So he will look after his daily needs and all now. So it's very difficult for them to come to the court of law, to come to the justice delivery system, even if their rights are being violated, they are being, humiliated, exploited by the, rich people. This is a perspective from the, this victim's perspective. Again, from the perspective of the, accused, there's also one issue, some sort of challenges. Suppose in case of Nirbhaya case, when the offense was committed, I'm not favoring the accused. They have been convicted, no doubt. In case of Nirbhaya case, all the accused belong to this lower strata of society. And I have been observing when an offense is being committed by a person belonging to lower strata, the legal system becomes more hyperactive, and even this justice delivery system will come to all the media persons. Justice delivery system will all come against the accused person, and it hardly took 1.5 years to dispose of the entire proceeding of Nirbhaya case, because justice delivery system was very hyperactive when offense is being committed by a person belonging to lower strata. But in case of BMW hit and run case, see how many years it had taken. So if the offense is being committed by a person belonging to high strata or very influential family, then it seems that the pace of the delivery system becomes almost snail pace. It doesn't move. So there is disparity in terms of access of justice between people belonging to lower strata and people belonging to higher strata. So we need to, see the things very minutely, and the law has to be applied in a very uniform and, smooth manner, regardless of the class, race, whatever, status he has. We have to apply it in a very uniform way. I think this is one of the challenges. And another thing is that we are talking about this free and competent legal services. In MASLSA also, in NALSA also, we are talking about free and competent legal services to be provided to the poor litigants. Now the question is, how free is free and how competent is competent? We have to see the things in the very grassroots level, because many a time when I was sitting as judge, civil judge in a division, many councils are reluctant to take briefs concerning civil matters, because it is very, very labor intensive, and plus there's a need of lots of documentation. And in return, they are getting a very meager amount of money as fee from the, MASLSA. And in the long run, what happens is that the person to whom a case is being assigned, he neglected the things. I'm not talking that all the LACs are neglecting their briefs. And in the long run, what happens is that there is communication gap between the person who's seeking legal help and the person who is handling the case. And the free legal aid becomes not a free legal aid, because ultimately he has to, in order to get his benefit, in order to get his justice, the person who's approaching the court will switch over to a person who can give justice in a very effective manner. So initially, free and competent legal service will be provided, but in the long run, as the return to the LAC is not up to the mark, it becomes a futile exercise. These are things which I want to share with and there are some other views. I will take the opportunity at one point of time.
Thank you very much for your very active participation and involvement in this thinking process that we are doing together. There is also a very important question that has come up from Sir Ojes Mutum. He is a judge in the fast track court, and we have put it up in the screen. Kindly share the stand of the panel on the apparent inequalities on the access of the citizens to healthcare facilities in terms of treatment, testing, etc. during the COVID pandemic situation. I don't think there can be a second opinion on this particular issue, because healthcare, I think, is the most critical question that we are dealing with at the present crisis. My only problem is that we have already overshot the time, and we will not be able to do an honest discussion to many of the questions which are raised. But the idea of today's panel is not to give you answers, but to raise questions. Questions of how do we protect human rights? How do we recover in a way that without losing sight of our human rights? And therefore, I thank each and every one of you who have participated, who have taken pain in organizing this, the friends who are doing the technology from Tengbang, who is giving us this opportunity to interact, the Manipur Legal Services Authority, who has taken up this initiative, even though we have put out our name. To be very honest, 99% of the work is done by them. Thank you very much for all the committed staff, and we very much look forward to a positive engagement between the civil society and the Legal Services Authority to redeem the promise to fight for human rights, which is set out by the United Nations, and for all of us to recover better from this pandemic. It was out of the Second World War's ravage that the imagination of human rights came about. I think from the ravage of the COVID-19, we should take the pledge to make it a reality and not just an empty promise that remains in our books and in our thoughts, but get down to action, implement what is written in our Constitution and in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Let us try and make as much as we can to breathe soul and life to these empty words. Otherwise, it will continue to remain an empty word. Thank you very much to all the panelists who have taken time out from your busy schedule, and also to all the honorable judges and judicial officers who have also taken out the time from a very busy schedule, and to all our friends who are physically present, and to all our friends who are watching in your mobile phone and your laptops in different parts of Manipur and beyond. Again, a very happy International Human Rights Day. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.